Batman Urban Legends issue 15. Matt read this, or at least two of the stories, and is going to tell us about them.
All right, so just real quick, I was reading that Zatanna Batman one. I did read it. All I want to talk about is how off Constantine felt, and I'm not a big Constantine fan, but he called Batman a DILF, and it was, and like I get it, Constantine's a complex character, and I get he's a bit of a raps guy, and him calling Bruce though a DILF just did not feel right. Connor, can you help me? You're the Constantine guy.
What's that? Dad, I'd like to fluff. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. So that shows up in that story, and that story gets a lot weirder. Yeah. So, but the first story I'm going to talk about is Batman and Plastic Man, written by Joey Esposito, who I don't know if Connor was in that group, but it was we all met coming out of this what was that, podcast Facebook group? I can't even remember at this point. It's been decades, right? But yeah, so he's gotten a chance to write for DC, and he got to write this short here. I'm trying to get to the artist, so I can also give the artist credit. But yeah, so it's Batman and Plastic Man teaming up, and that there's a guy that's going to flip on the Penguin. And of course, the guy that's going to flip on Penguin goes back with Plastic Man. They knew each other from the time that Plastic Man was just a hench for hire. And Batman fully believes that no, this guy's running, that he's not going to flip on the Penguin because the Penguin, you don't do that, right? But Plastic Man's like, no, I know this guy. He's going to do what's right. His name's Stampy. Art in this is by Jason Howard. And so they end up, Batman and Plastic Man team up, and they find out that KG Beast has been hired by Penguin to bring Stampy in. And so Plastic Man gets into, how he knows Stampy, and is that before, they had really come to Gotham, they were doing like a casing of it, and they're there and they experience a Joker attack. And Batman comes and saves them. And it was at that point that the man that would become Plastic Man, E.L. O'Brien, had decided he was going to get his life together and not do the criminal stuff anymore. And then, of course, he becomes Plastic Man, he says shortly later. But it was that he was inspired by Batman, and that, Batman just has to trust that Stampy's going to do the right thing. So Batman and Plastic Man go and, they fight KG Beast. They knock him out of this helicopter. There's a lot of boats involved out in the open ocean, which leads to Plastic Man taking a lot of fun forms. Like at one point, he's like a windboard, or is that what that's called? Yeah, where it's got like the surfboard but it has a sail on it. And then other times he's just a sail on like a rowboat. Plastic Man ends up wrapping KG Beast up because him and Batman are going back and forth, and KG Beast tells Batman, "Oh yeah, you're a coward. You won't use guns. This is why people keep coming back." And that allows Plastic Man to wrap him up for Batman to deliver the KO. They end up getting back into Gotham, and Bruce lets Stampy go and is going to trust him in order to turn himself into the DA like he was supposed to. With, Batman saying in the narrative boxes, all criminals are cowards, but it's nice to be reminded that they can choose to be something greater. And it was just a real nice, it almost felt like a Brave and the Bold from the cartoon. Like one of those kind of team ups. The voice on Bruce is, it's very animated series where he's not overly serious, and there's not a lot of inner monologue. A lot of this is told through the dialogue, and the Plastic Man is pretty spot on. A lot of fun little zingers, and him turning into the different water stuff, um, and he doesn't do a lot of transforming outside of that, but you know a lot of the stretching stuff. So like at one point, KGBeast is just raining on him bullets from a helicopter, and Plastic Man, does like a human shield maneuver for Sampy, and he's like, "Hey, it'd be nice if you would move because I'm plastic, but it still hurts to get shot." And the way that he's drawn doing the human shield, it's he's all stretched out, wrapping around him, which is super cool. But yeah, no, this was a real fun story. The type of stuff that I'm glad can exist in a book like this, because I don't know where else this story would pop up. Like it's not quite an annual, but so I'm glad that Urban Legends, at least for that. So I'll give that story. I'll give that one a 7.5. And then the again, I always say this is the main event. This is the Carl Moser, Mark Russell, Ace the Bad Hound story. And we get Ace's origin that 5 years ago, this older guy goes up to an apartment and says that he wants to adopt one of these puppies they put in the paper, and he takes them and says that it's going to be a fresh start. Gets him home, has him he has him a bowl, and there's a knock at the door. Before the old guy can answer it, the door's kicked in, and it's Joker. Turns out this guy was one of Joker's henchmen that wanted to start a fresh life, and he can't have him do that. So he shows up, and he just tells him, the witness protection, doesn't really matter much. Calls him by his name, and he says that, the older guy's like, fine, just make it quick, and Joker stabs him in the chest, which leaves this dog, and Joker sits on the ground with them, and Joker's henchman's like, well, just make it quick. We don't, just throw him off the balcony or something. Joker's like, no, let me have fun. Did they not teach you anything at community college? And he sits down and offers to play the dog high card to where Joker draws a king. And he goes, up, that's not looking good for you, guy. And he ends up drawing an ace, which is fun. That's how Ace got his name. So that's where he takes the dog and leaves the other henchman, there, shoots him because he's pulling out the knife, makes it look like the one henchman killed him, and Joker walks away. And then we get back to the present day, and Ace and the squirrel and the turtle and the chicken are still looking for Bruce. And the chicken ends up, being able to use the internet through its, cybernetics. They track Bruce to where he's at. And during these one of the cage matches that's going on is they decide to add another element where they make the two guys draw cards, and one guy ends up with a candlestick and one ends up with a revolver. So all I can think of is they just pulled cards from Clue, I guess. And the guy that drew the candlestick's upset because he's like, this is not fair. And the revolver ends up only having one shot in it, which the guy wastes by shooting himself in the leg, which leads to the candlestick guy just walloping him. The villains that are sitting around this cage fight get bored, including the Joker, who's like, this is not what we came for. So the Russian guy brings out Batman. All the villains start, trying to win Batman, but they point out, Joker points out, like, wait, how do we know it's really him? We can't know. This could be any schlub that you dressed up as Batman. So the Russians like, oh, well, there's only one test. Pick somebody, or we'll pick someone to have Batman fight, and you can see him. That's really Batman before you buy him. As the animals are heading there, they get caught into a trap, and they're like, oh, we don't have time. We just need to bring, some of them back because they're out of time. And as they're going, the chicken realizes it's a trap, and one of the bad guys shoots the chicken, and it's super sad. And I don't like that he did this to us, because Mark Russell has a way of doing this. I don't know if you guys have read like his Flintstones, but he gets you to really buy into these characters that you normally wouldn't. And then he takes them away. And I should know this by now, not to get too attached, right? It's kind of the Game of Thrones thing. Can't get too attached to certain characters. But yeah, the chicken sacrifices itself for Ace and the others. So Ace goes into action. He gets grazed because the squirrel jumps on one of the other villains, who just starts wildly shooting. And then Lex Luthor, who the villain, or who the henchmen go to let out, decides that, he doesn't want to be controlled by these idiots and attacks him, which leads him and Ace having a standoff where, he kind of lets Lex go. The other animals get around and mourn the chicken, who's, experiences his final moments, to which Ace nuzzles, which again, completely destroyed me. And he gets back to Batman, and they said, all the villains are arguing that none of them want to fight Batman, because if it really is Batman, they all know what it's like. And the rest was like, oh no, we already have this in, bring her in. And it ends up being the bear who they, got back in the last issue. And so now it looks like Batman's going to have to fight a bear, and I'm not okay with this at all. Because Batman, right?
Who do you root for?
I root for the bear, but that's me. And that's not everybody. But I'm sure they'll be able to, get out of this, because he's already Russell's already caused me so much emotional damage. He's got to make good here. But yeah, no, this story is been the highlight of Urban Legends for the last 5 issues. So yeah, the Mostert art, again, it plays a lot of the heavy emotions here. The way he designs his villains is, I can't think of the artist. I'd have to show you guys the art. Connor's usually pretty good at finding comparisons. But it's very familiar, but not familiar at the same time. So I like designs like the Joker design. He has Ivy sitting in a plant chair, which is a lot of fun.
Who is the artist here?
Carl Mostert.
Okay, I'm familiar, but not enough to know.
Yeah. So yeah. So I'll give this story an 8.5. So, averaging out the book out of the 2 that I read, that gives it about an 8.